and address your questions. Uh, and literally, it's an open array for your questions as we go through this. So very informal, and you have a great opportunity here to take advantage of this. And I'm sure we'll have some other people join as they finish lunch. In fact, they're happy to bring lunch in here and have it right here. So I'll turn it over to General Morrison for some opening thoughts, and then you just raise your hand, and I'll be right there with you with the mic, and we'll get it going.
Good afternoon. Can we turn down just a little bit?
Got it.
Hey, so good afternoon. So as Mike was sitting there saying, we want this to be very, very informal, and this really is about Q&A. So I'm only going to talk for a whopping 3 minutes, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, and we can go whichever direction you want to go. Cyber, electronic warfare, signal, the build out that's happening over at Fort Gordon, community stuff, we can go whichever way that you want to go. Fair enough? And I have with me our two commandants, Brigadier General Neil Hersey, who's our cyber commandant. He's also responsible for electronic warfare. And then, Chris Eubank, who's our brand new signal commandant. I even had to look twice to make sure I remembered his name. So they'll be here to backstop me in case there's something that you ask that I can't answer. So, big rocks for this next coming year. Continue to build capacity inside our cyber school and rebuild capacity inside our signal school. So, with the cyber school, it's really about more capacity, more throughput, more efficiently, more effectively, and quite frankly, starting to bring in our joint partners. So starting next year, every Marine cyber operator is going to be trained at Fort Gordon. Again, building capacity, streamlining it to make it more effective, so we are pushing combat power into the cyber force quicker, because it's going to happen at 2 echelons now. It's not just going to be inside Army cyber. We're also going to start building cyber capacity at the tactical edge. And so effectively and efficiently, and still not deviating from the standards of which we've been producing so far, getting that capability into the force is very important. On the signal side, for a myriad of reasons, quite frankly, we had sort of fell out of date with the training that we needed to be doing inside the signal school. So reestablishing that capacity, making sure that all of our signalers, regardless of their MOS, can operate in an all IP world is job one for Chris Eubank and his team. That's on the schoolhouse side. You've heard a lot about rapid prototyping. Well, I would submit to you that we want to continue to leverage cyber to continue to drive change across our Army. You've heard me use the anecdote of how we have accelerated the requirements identification process. An ISICD, an IT box construct, approved in December. The first specific requirements approved in February. Prototypes inside the Cyber Protection Brigade in April. Fielding decision September. That's how fast we have to be moving inside this domain. And we can only do it with the help of our industry partners, so we can rapidly spin. And as General Gallagher just pointed out, we've got to bake cyber into everything that we're doing. And so we're doing that same thing inside our command posts. Again, a DevOps cycle that allows us to move very, very quickly so that we can keep pace with the threat, because the threat is ever evolving. And so therefore, from a requirements and a capability delivery perspective, we must evolve. Now, on the EW side and on the signal side, we're going to do rapid prototyping, but it's going to be different. So starting this fall, we will get a brigade designated by U.S. Forces Command that will allow us to build an EW platoon and a CMIS section and equip both, so that we can make sure that the force design updates that we've submitted to the big Army are right. So it's prototyping the organization. It's starting to prototype the kit that we want to put inside that formation so we can fight and actually deliver offensive cyber and electronic attack in a contested and congested environment. In other words, take the fight to the enemy. So it's going to allow us to do that, make sure that we've got it about right. And then lastly, we've got to validate our training, because we have to train different operators than we've trained before. for all the right reasons, our EW professionals have been worried about the counter IED fight. We've got to teach our EW operators, educate them on how to conduct offensive operations. We're also going to do some rapid prototyping with our Expeditionary Signal Battalion. So the 50th Signal Battalion is already undergoing this transition. You heard a little bit of it from General Bassett upstairs. But we are taking kit from units like the Joint Communication Support Element and our SOF partners, and we are handing that over to the 50th Signal Battalion and taking away all of their Win-T Increment 1 Bravo assemblages. And they are going to operate on this kit and be able to fly away and reach IOC by 1 November of this year. But when we do that, it changes the organizational design. So with less people, we're going to be able to provide 60% more combat power, 60% more command posts that we're going to be able to support from one organization while we're able to reduce the number of folks that are assigned to the Expeditionary Signal Battalion, so that we can then reinvest it back into other Army and Signal Corps requirements, right? It will be the most significant redesign of the Signal Regiment in probably the last 20 or 30 years, certainly since my time in the military. And so those are the big rocks that we've got ongoing. All the while, we begin transforming Fort Gordon and really start putting in our new facilities. And that all starts this year. Buildings start coming down. We have 4 of our main buildings that are now unoccupied that are either waiting to be demolished or to be renovated. And in December, the Signal School moves into their new headquarters. Transformation is happening. And so we will continue to work very, very closely with the community as we get set for bringing Army Cyber down, while at the same time we start building the facilities that we need so we can conduct the world's best training for the world's best operators in the world's best facilities. So I'm going to stop there, just sort of give you a high-level look at the main things that are on my radar, and I look forward to your questions. We can go whichever avenue that you would like to go. So please. And please don't make us just stand up here and look at you.
I'll throw the first softball out since I got the mic in my hand. Sir, I know you've had some arrangements that you've set up over the past year or so with industry in terms of supporting your students exterior to the Signal School or the Cyber School maybe. Have you looked at the ability to do exchange programs with industry, to have industry actually do training inside the Cyber and Signal School, as well as having an exchange program outside?
So we do have some industry partners that are already teach inside the Signal School. Our partners from Mosaic over there is one example.
Okay.
And we also have training with industry that we're heavily involved in, and that's both on cyber and the signal side, where we do send warrant officers and now enlisted and officers out to spend about a year with industry, and then we bring them back into select jobs so we can capitalize on that experience. But we're looking to broaden it because what we really want to do is much more frequent engagements. So we've started what we call these broadening seminars, where we will team with selected industry partners, and we'll send a whole bunch of folks out to these seminars, but for shorter durations. So we get more reps and sets with our industry partners, as opposed to, quite frankly, when you take a look at what we're sending for training with industry, it really is less than a dozen folks a year. And that's not the numbers that we want. We want much more frequent engagement.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, Paul Faulkner with Mosaic Technologies Group. Just wanted to get a quick update on how the relocation and move is going from Fort Belvoir to Augusta since the last time we asked about 6 months ago.
Sure thing, sir. So, I always started off with Army Cyber is already here. It's not like they're not here already. The Joint Force Headquarters has stood up. 7th Signal Command, which works for them, is already here. The Cyber Protection Brigade is already here. The 782nd, MI Battalion, which works for Army Cyber, is already here. It's the rest of them that are coming. So the building is on track to be complete in the January timeframe. It's going to take about 18 months to get all the IT equipment fitted into that building. So that portion of it is remaining completely on schedule. What we're working through now, and we're working it very closely with Army Cyber, is advertising everything that's available here in the CSRA so that we get the maximum number of folks moving south that we possibly can. We know from previous BRAC moves that generally ends up being around the 25% mark. We think right now with Army Cyber we're around the 30% mark, which means collectively from a community perspective we're going to have to work very, very hard, because that's where we start talking about we've got to attract the right talent to come here, because we are talking about very, very technically skilled folks. And it's always important to note that half the folks that are coming with the our Cyber move are DA civilians, Department of the Army civilians. They have a choice on where they work. And so that is the portion that we're really, really starting to center. The green suiters are easy. You're going to Fort Gordon. Our civilian teammates, not so much. And so there's a marketing campaign that we're working very, very hard with Army Cyber so that we send the right message.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you again.
Great to see you, sir.
So we have, the world is such a different place. I just heard Generals Bassett and Gallagher speak of when they were young lieutenants in 1986. And 1986, I was a young SATCOM engineer, right, working on defense programs. And
When you were 12, right?
yeah, here we go. The world's in such a different place now because private sector investment is so significant. Okay, I mean, we have companies putting up satellite constellations with their own money. We have folks looking at fielding thousands of LEO satellites to create a capability. We even have individual companies whose individual R&D budget is greater than that of DoD. Okay, so what we want to do is bring the power of this investment to work for the warfighter. So if a company like ours is fielding a satellite constellation with terabits of capacity, and we believe we're fielding an integrated active cyber defense that's a holistic part of that, and we believe we have an anti-jam capability that is game-changing. How do we bring that capability forward so that DoD and the Army, in their EW capacity and their cyber capacity, can test our system to evaluate it, characterize it, so that you can characterize it in a warfighter context so that we can decide collectively, A, how to bring it to use for the warfighter, and B, if we need to spend some of that investment money to make it better, that we're willing to do that, but we need to characterize it and know where our gaps or weaknesses might be. So where's the venue where which we could do that?
That's a great bunch of questions. So I'm gonna try and back a little bit just to provide a little bit of context.
Those questions have been pent up since I was 12, sir. So
That's fair enough. You make it hard to start. So let me go with this notion that's a key part of the pivot. So halt the programs that aren't working, fix what we've got so we can fight tonight, and then pivot to a new approach. That pivot really didn't come out in the last session, so I want to bang on it real hard, because the key underpinning of it is this notion of adapt and buy. And we got a little hung up on our joint and our soft partners in that. But we know as an Army, we will never be able to compete with the IT explosion that has happened out there, nor should we, right? So how do we ride industry's coattails so that we can bring new and emerging capabilities or mature capabilities into the force in an efficient and effective manner where it fits? Right? So that's that notion of adapt and buy, right? We only want to be spending our precious R&D dollars on those military unique things that industry doesn't have to worry about. The high level encryption for our most classified networks, things along that line, as a very simple objective. And then adapt what industry and our joint partners and our soft partners have to Army uses. So that's one. So industry is a key part of the pivot. When you take a look at what we're doing with this ESB conversion, it is all about what industry has offered to other folks in the community that is proven that we're just merely adopting and we're adapting it to what our structure and our mission needs to be, and we're rapidly getting it into a formation because it fits. Now, to the second part of yours, you heard General Gallagher and General Bassett start talking about these tech exchange meetings. Very, very important that industry pays a part to that, because that's where the engagements are starting, right? Now, there's been 2. They will eventually get much more predictable. It's the right word. It's the word I was searching for, so I apologize. Much more predictable, so that industry has that touch point. Industry always has their touch points with our PMs, and industry always has their touch points with our TRADOC capability managers, right? And if you don't know who they are, I will very definitely make sure that by the end of this conference we flash all those names up, so you know who to be reaching out to. But the tech exchange meetings is where we have that open dialogue with our industry partners, so we can talk about and figure out, it's an overused word, but it's true, because you know much more about what's in the art of the possible than somebody in a green suit will. But I got to bang on the notion one more time of this adapt and buy. Our biggest problem, Morrison's very candid professional opinion, was we were trying to develop network capabilities. That was a fool's errand, right? We need to adopt what industry is doing, leverage it, experiment with it, quite frankly, things that may not quite fit, just to see what it will do for us, because that may open up a whole new venue for us. And quite frankly, that is something that our soft partners have right. They are willing to take something, experiment with it, and then throw it in a circular file if it doesn't work, or go ahead and adapt it and bring it into their formations if it does. I hope that answers your question.
Another question for the schoolhouse. Now that we're
You're not allowed to ask me a question.
this isn't that hard, but it is important, I think. How do we bring the lessons we're learning at the keyboard now of our operating forces back into the schoolhouse? How do we not make the schoolhouse a delay in learning? Make it fresh, current, and relevant, so as they graduate, we're not losing the step in combating the threat that's advancing as quickly as we know it is. So how do we connect the two? You can say maneuver forces and you think Fort Leavenworth and Center for Army Lessons Learned, and it just tracks. How's it working here at Gordon for that force?
So I'll give you my perspective, then I'll let Chris talk about from his perspective. So I'd say for both of us, one of the many great things about being here at Fort Gordon is being co-located with the operational force. As General Morrison mentioned, a lot of our operational force, my primary customer is already here at Fort Gordon between the Cyber Protection Brigade and the 782nd for the offensive side. We have things ongoing every day, and being connected to both of those organizations allows us to, on a near real-time basis, incorporate those updated TTPs into our course of instruction. We have what I would describe as an open architecture to update our course content near real time based on feedback from the operational force. So that's kind of part one. The other thing is the formal feedback from those forces through either Cyber Command or Army Cyber in terms of what are the broad things that are changing, the way the adversary is approaching our networks and the way we need to deal with them, and we incorporate that into to all aspects of our training. But being co-located is absolutely key to that. So let me turn it over to Chris to see what.
So I'll just piggyback on what Neil's saying. So the fact that I have an operational signal brigade sitting at Fort Gordon, which is actually owns the battalion that is the pilot for the ESB Enhanced, allows those operators to come right back across the street and provide feedback on what they're seeing in new equipment, which allows us to take it right back into the schoolhouse. So being co-located is absolutely a must. Where we've got to connect the dots better is the force outside of Gordon. So I have a signal brigade sitting here, but I've got a ton of forces sitting outside of Fort Gordon that we are now reaching out to on a weekly basis to get feedback from. The SFABs are a great example. You got one in Afghanistan today. We reached out to the signal forces as part of that structure and asked how things were going. And so you'd be amazed at what those young officers and NCOs are sending back to us that we're able to incorporate back into the training we're doing. But that's an ongoing process, and we're trying to make that better with the larger force versus right here at Fort Gordon.
I'm just going to add one thing, and we're going to implement this across the entire COE. Right now it's just in the cyber school, but any 17 series can go onto a website and make a recommended curriculum change. That's all automated. Everybody sees it, gets to the appropriate approval authority, and then we're able to rapidly change the curriculum based off of that request, if it makes sense, right? Sometimes they're one-offs, and it doesn't quite raise to the line of you want to teach that to everybody. In visits we've had with the TRADOC leadership, we've now been told to get a roadshow going where we'll take it to all the other centers of excellence for them to take a look at and implement in their schools as well.
Sir, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today and your willingness to take a wide variety of questions. Over the past 2 days, or day and a half, we've heard information on a lot of great topics, trending topics with the Army. Many of them dealt with threats to our network, adversaries operating against us in our network, some of the modernization efforts that we as an Army are trying to undertake. One trend that I didn't hear about that I'd be interested in getting your perspective on is that of our work with our allies and partners. The Army's increasingly focused now on wanting to talk about and work on and through a mission partner environment. And so from the aspect of either how we educate and train our officers and soldiers to think and operate in that type of environment, or on the opposite side, what are we doing to influence those types of requirements that we're asking industry for to help us operate in that environment? Either or both would be great. Thank you.
So I was given the mic, so I get the first chance. So right up front, what we're doing is the stacks we're fielding and the exercises we're going to be doing in the future will all be done on a coalition environment, not a SIPR environment. So as you approach NIEs and the exercises in the force, they're all going to be done on a coalition stack, not on a SIPR stack. That's guidance coming down from General Townsend, is we've got to enter into this coalition world, this multi-partner environment. It's an ongoing discussion inside the Mission Command Center of Excellence with Major General Chrisman. He probably knows more about the MPE environment than he ever wanted to, but he is well versed in trying to get that stack inside of the formation so that it is the one we're training on versus the U.S. only SIPR net. And that's my first stab at that.
So just a couple of things. So one is we are entering that realm in the cyber school where we've got our first partner nation that will be coming to go through our training, and that's with the country of Australia. What we've seen in the operational forces, we're already doing coalition operations in cyberspace to great effect. I won't go into the specifics, but that is now trickling into the learning institution, and we expect that to both grow and scale out with other partners wanting to participate.
I'll just close it out real quick. So first off, the General Bassett said a great thing. You know, you gotta want something long enough to stay with it. You know, so how many folks think that we have to have U.S. secret all the way down to the edge? Right? We actually broke that nut back in 2012, where we got the policy changed so that we didn't have to do that. But we didn't stay with it. And so we found ourselves in this quandary. And the reality of it is we will never, ever fight alone. We will always fight as a part of a coalition. So changing the security boundary is absolutely critical, because you heard General Eubank talk a little bit about, hey, we're going to go ahead and operate primarily in a mission partner environment, with SIPR now being, U.S. secret now being the exception. That's at the tactical, that's at the upper part of the network. But now, by changing the security boundary, you can do it down at the edge. I remember the first time I talked with General Hodges when he was the USARA commander. He was telling me about a U.S. brigade that had a German company that was working for them that had, I forget the nation's platoon working for it. And so how do you make all those folks talk when the only thing they want to do is talk voice? Well, you change the security boundary. And so that's a very important part of the tenet that we've got in place as we're moving this forward.
Hey, sir, Brendan Herring from IDS International. We met, I don't know if you remember, a couple years ago in Razish at the National Training Center in a small, hot little Connex box where my colleague and I were running the replicated social media environment out there in the box and are still doing that. It's grown to incorporate some cyber and some EW stuff, but not to the extent that it could if industry was truly allowed to provide our range of solutions. So I know with the increasing integration of I/O with cyber, EW, and Signal, and with General Bodette from USASOC just having been out to NTC and said, why do we not have a more robust replicated training environment? My question, sir, is what do you guys need from us in industry to better get the schoolhouse, home station, and operational training that you need for I/O, cyber, and EW across the board?
So the STE, the synthetic training environment, CFT, is going to start moving down that road. But two things for you. One is resources are now being aligned to fully kit out the combat training centers to really replicate and operate a congested and contested environment. Now, it's coming, and so it's not there today because you're right. I remember out in that box, and it was hot as hell, by the way. That it was nascent, and quite frankly, most of it was homegrown, right? I mean, it was Army Cyber Netcom that was working with you to try and build this capability. So we're going to move away from that, and the industry is going to be a key piece of it because what we want to make sure that the OP4 has is the same kind of capabilities that we would face if we were going against a near peer. So that as we start fielding friendly force capability, we really get a good look at it. That rapid prototyping that I was talking about with the EW platoon, it's going to culminate in a CTC rotation because that's where we're going to get the best look of a force-on-force kind of look. What do we need from industry? Ideas, because you'll start seeing things come out of the acquisition side of this that's being driven by operational requirements. And if there's a hole in our swing, we need that candid dialogue. Okay? That's going to be I'm coming right there, ma'am. That's really going to be the biggest thing that we need. Industry is a key piece of the Army's modernization strategy. Forget the network, right? Industry is a key piece of the Army's modernization strategy. Got to be an integral partner. Oh, you don't need to stand up.
Sir, Heather White. I work for General Dynamics as a senior cyber architect, and my question is, as we move more towards prototype, and then prototype transitioning into contract. What I'm seeing as we've been doing this now for a year plus is a great focus on technical innovation, getting it to the hands faster, with very little emphasis on the RMF ANA issues. So we had taken this great step from DICAP to RMF, but now there's not funding in most of the prototypes for the secure built-in security capabilities. So what I'm seeing is more and more people are like, oh, well, we'll do that under contract. But if we're transitioning prototypes to contracts, then we're missing that built-in, and now we're adding extra cost and time once we do the prototype to actually then slap on cybersecurity again to make sure that those prototypes to contracts become certifiable.
I could not agree more. Well said.
So what is there going to be a process to say TRL 5 and below needs to do this, TRL 6 and above needs to do another set of requirements?
So that is a great question. You heard, I don't know if you were in a session with General Crawford, but he knows from a policy perspective he's got to go back in and work with OSD to readdress the RMF process, because what we are executing was not what the intent of it was. The intent of it was to allow you to make risk-informed decisions from an operational perspective, not do DICAP version 2.0, and it was a paperwork drill. And I'm being a little trite when I sit there and say that, but that's the reason why it was moved out of the process was moved out of the Pentagon and given to an operational unit that's responsible for DOD and Ops. And for those that don't know, it's out with the Network Enterprise Technology Command to operationalize it. But there's some policy things that are hindering that, and that's what General Crawford is working. and he gave himself a suspense of the next 90 days. But absolutely agree, we've got to do something about it. Bureaucracy should not drive operations, ever.
Good afternoon, generals over here, stage right, in the cheap seats. Hey, I'm just wondering, would you be willing to make any comments about the current status and future of JRSS in the Army and DoD in general? Where is that off bounds? Or
Yeah,
out
that,
of bounds?
it's not off bounds. It's just outside my lane. I would defer that one to General Baker and General Fogarty.
Fair enough. Thanks.
I will say this about it, though, just to give you some feedback. I know there's a very focused effort, both at the joint level and at the service level, working together to come up with the right C2 mechanism and get, level set where we are at today. As a matter of fact, I know General Baker's out at Scott Air Force Base this week working some things.
Sir, Ron Frame from the Signal School.
None of my folks get to ask any questions.
But I always ask a question, sir. My question is to the commandants. We've gone to foundational training for the enlisted on the Signal side. I wanted to hear your thoughts on the possibility of some foundation or common core within, say, SBOLIC or SCCC.
So great question, and actually a really timely thing that General Eubank and I have had some discussions about. So there are certainly some efficiencies that we're looking at gaining in terms of bringing, particularly our BOLIC students who are really in the same state when they come to Fort Gordon. They haven't had any of their formal Army officer training, and between what Cyber Branch does, what Signal Branch does, those are completely integrated. And starting that training together as a course of action we're going to look at, because there are a lot of things on the foundational side that those skill sets that both officers from Cyber Branch and Signal Branch and soon to be electronic warfare, which will be part of Cyber Branch, need. And then at some point after that, they go on their different tracks. But we've got some discussions to have to pull that together. But acknowledge that that's something we need to look at for our officer force as well. Chris, anything to add?
No, I don't have much more than that. Interestingly enough, timely as Neil said it, the mantra inside the Signal House is leader, teammate, communicator, right? So it starts with leader, teammate, and right now what Neil and I are trying to figure out is what are we teaching them, leader and teammate, that we can do comprehensively together, common core, and then send them off to be communicators, signal leaders, or cyber warriors. So we're working through that. The discussions have just started as I get on board here, but I think we've got a lot of opportunity here at Fort Gordon to create a holistic cyber force, signal leaders, and cyber warriors that get after the problem set in the future.
Sorry about that. The only thing I would add is the Cyber Common Technical Core, going to a technical perspective on this, is taught to every cohort, enlisted, warrant officer, and officer. I think what your question is, are we going to take that same technical approach with Signal? Am I getting it right? Got it. Yep, they're going to sort all that out.
So
No do-overs.
No, this is a new question. From a thank you for answering my question on the collaboration from a communications networking capability perspective. From a collaboration perspective on a cyber perspective. So I'm Ken Peterman from Viasat. We're becoming a global internet service provider. We have 2 million devices on our network every day, several thousand airplanes and thousands of ships and things like that. So we have an integrated active cyber defense on our network. And we see the attacks every day. We see we do big data analytics on the attack vectors so that we can see the trajectory that the vectors are on. We can see on a particular commercial airline flight, for example, an American Airlines flight at 8 in the morning, the shuttle between city A and B, the cyber threat vectors are different on that flight than they are on other flights or on residential customers and things like that. So my question is, that's that's a resource, a database that might be of significant value to the Army's Cyber Command, and there must be a forum where which we could share the cyber threat data that we're seeing, the threat vectors that are emergent, the big data analytics that we're running, and those kind of things. How do we create a venue where which we could collaborate more effectively with you and maybe learn from each other, or at least you could tap into what we're learning?
So acknowledge the importance of data sharing, and there are a lot of discussions that are going on at higher levels than much higher levels than me to try and bring those things together between the private sector, the public sector, DoD, et cetera. What I can tell you, our approach is at how we train and educate our operators to think about that is really focus on the problem solving. So when they go into a problem set, there are any number of potential solutions or non-solutions to that they have to work through, and they have to take all those aspects and considerations. When they work their capstone project, they can pick anything that they choose to tackle as a problem set. And one example I'll use is how do we get after UAS systems that might want to target either us in the homeland or our forces downrange. So they're introduced to that level, that type of thinking to pull those things together. But certainly, what plays into that is the multiple vectors that data comes in that they have to resolve and incorporate in their problem-solving process. So that's. I don't want to get into the policy or what the operational force is doing, but that's how we're looking at it from an education and training perspective.
I'm going to come at it a little bit different. We need to do better, and quite frankly, as I was listening to your question, I've sort of like self-tasking myself to get with General Fogarty, because we got to formalize it a little bit better inside the Army. Because I think what you're really saying is, how do we share information? Because from a cybersecurity perspective, we all have the same problem.
Yeah, we're running a security operations center, and we're seeing attacks on the network in real time. We're doing big data analytics on those attacks. We have 400 military aircraft running on our network right now. So would it be valuable for you to take one of your students and insert them into industry and let them live in our SOC for 30 days or 60 days and that kind of thing? Is that kind of an exchange, collaboration kind of a thing useful? Because we'd certainly be more than willing to do that.
That ties back into those broadening seminars that we were talking about. And that we are starting to really develop, because that's exactly what we want to try and do. Short durations, learn a lot of reps, different folks that are out there, because you're going to have different TTPs than I had at Netcom, just using a simple example, right? That you're right, we can do better in that regard.
And just to caveat, there is a forum. It's called the DIBNet, Defense Industrial Base Network. And yes, there's an office up at Baltimore area that kind of honchos it, and if you do business with, if you're a DIB partner, you have to go through that. So actually, there is.
And we are a DIB partner, but the collaboration I'm talking about
I'm
is
tracking,
different than
and we need to bring it lower than that one. Please. So now you've asked me a long question from when you were 12 years old. Now you've tasked me. You don't get the mic again.
Done.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Vega. I work at USARC, US Army Reserve Headquarters, COG6. My question is regarding Compo 3. I heard a lot of things, great things for the senior soldier, but how are we going to integrate the reserve soldier? The other question I have is, this is a story. A couple of years ago, I have an 11 Bravo reserve soldier who was actually HBSS program manager, implemented HBSS for the Army. However, I was unable to bring him over to my unit because there was an issue to get him credentials from the civilian side to the military. So at the end of the day, we couldn't bring him over. And my question is, are we changing the process to ensure that that reserve soldier has the skills, can get the intrinsic qualifications to become a 25 Bravo, 25 Delta, whatever the mission is?
I don't know. I really don't know about your specific one. What I would tell you is if somebody's looking to become a 25 Delta or a 255 Sierra or something along that line, there is a very set process, and we are hiring. And it is pretty streamlined if they've got the right skills, right? Because what we're looking for is the experience component of it. And so there is a process, and I can have General Eubank get with you after this and can walk you through that piece. But we want all the 255 Sierras and 25 Deltas that we can possibly get. And soon. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is John Schweppe. I'm with Northrop Grumman. We're involved with research and development for hardening embedded systems. And I think you had mentioned the answer to this, but I need to know what PM to reach out to find out how we can better serve the Army in terms of enhancing their embedded systems.
Yes, sir. So in that regard, I wouldn't point you towards 1 PM because the reality of it is what you just described is ubiquitous, and it's going to be across so many PMs that you would be chasing yourself around the continental United States. The folks that I would point you towards would be up on the Army staff in the G3 shop, Damo Cyber, led by Brigadier General Jen Buckner, right? Because they are the Army lead for synchronizing that across the Army. And that would probably be a better inject for you. And if she's walking around and hears me, I just tasked her. Any other questions? Can be about anything. Going once. Going twice. All right, going 3 times. I'm going to turn it over to the commandants and let them to say just a couple final words.
Thanks, sir. So what I'll leave you with is 6 weeks into the job, and what I'll tell you is I'm excited. I'm passionate about being here, and we're trying to talk to the force as much as possible, right? So the Signal Regiment has a job. As Neil and I talk about it every day, so if you think about cyber as a house, the Signal Regiment owns the house, and Neil and his team are the exterminators that come to the house to get rid of the bugs. So we have a job. We're training about 12,000 signaleers a year. We're changing the way they are getting trained so that they come to the force and the warfighter can point at somebody and they can solve a problem no matter what their specialty is. So we're looking for feedback every day. I have a team running around here. Grab us up, have a conversation with us. But I'm excited to be here, and just remember, we're building leaders, teammates, and communicators, and we're part of a greater team. Thanks.
So I've been with the school for about a year, and what strikes me is one is how the greater Augusta community has embraced everything that's going on at Fort Gordon, and we are very much benefiting from that. So from the day that I got here, my first year, we graduated 521 students from the cyber school. Go back to 2016, that was 15 people. And we're expecting this year for it to be somewhere between 1,000 and 1,100. That's even before we add electronic warfare. So it's about growth and charting a very forward-thinking way ahead as we bring all these aspects together. And I think increasing the collaboration between our two schools, between the cyber school and the signal school, is going to very much help accelerate that moving forward. And looking forward to the next 6 months, the next year, however much long General Morrison lets me stay in the position as the commandant. So thank you.
That's a daily struggle. I'm just going to go ahead and close. It is really an exciting time to be at Fort Gordon and in the CSRA with everything that is happening here. It's dynamic. And quite frankly, you know, when General Perkins, he only gave me one direction when I took over 2 years ago. Don't use cyber to change things for cyber's sake. Use cyber to change the way the Army thinks. And again, I'm going to start you where I'm going to finish where we started. Requirements document finalized in December, prototypes in April, fielding in September. Right? That is using cyber to change how the Army operates. And quite frankly, a lot of those techniques are now being adapted by the network CFT, because the network has got to be just as agile as what we're doing inside cyberspace, because it is the foundation for everything that we do. I really appreciate the dialogue today. Hopefully it was helpful for you guys, and I will see you around the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General Morrison. General Hershey, General Eubanks, your jobs are not trivial. You're producing the future of the Army in Signal and Cyber. Thank you. We'll start a session here at 1 and 1:15. You've got your schedules. If you want to grab something to eat and you haven't, you still have a few more minutes. Thank you for being here today again, and have a great afternoon.
We go hard till the sun come up. Ganja smoking, we got rum in the